these 2 or 3 things over the course of the next year, what are those 2 or 3 little things that would be the most impactful? Go do it right now. Where are you going to see the biggest return on that investment if you had 2 or 3 things that you could suggest to our listeners?
Absolutely. And this is what I talk about in my book, The Family Board Meeting, is the good news, Eric. I talk about rhythms, right? Rhythms. I love that word over habits, because habits, you can have a bad drinking habit. You can have a bad smoking habit. You can have a junk food eating habit, right? It sounds unintentional. Rhythms has that musical element, that soul to it, that keeping of the beat. That drum beat can keep your favorite song in line, right? I think the same thing with rhythms. So there's 2 rhythms that I encourage, and both of them include this principle, the one-to-one principle. If I had to say one of the most shocking discoveries I've had, Eric, out there is the top therapists and counselors, they don't make it as clear as this. And look, I've worked with them. I always try to have coaches and mentors in all areas of my life. But everyone kind of skipped over the one-to-one principle. And what this means is you got to separate the parts to strengthen the whole. That time with each of your children is sacred, and one-on-one time will put the magnifying glass on that relationship in a positive way. Same thing with your spouse. So the first and foremost I would tell people, Eric, and this is what my book is about, is if you are not having that weekly date with your spouse one-on-one, you are putting yourself in a very dangerous situation. And also you're giving up this fertile soil opportunity to really keep the relationship strong and intact. And I've been in front of some very influential rooms where I say, how many of you have a weekly date with your spouse? In less than 10% of the rooms, hands will go up. And these are very successful, intentional, good-hearted people, but they're busy. So what I've found is I have a weekly date with my wife, and then I have a quarterly day with each one of my children. This is really what 18 Summers was built on, where I started to say, you know what, if I look at my business, I have key clients, key team members, top investors in my business, and I schedule time with them. And so I started to schedule 1 day a quarter with each of my children, to give them that focus, go in on a day all about them. My phone was off, and that's something we'll talk about, but I spend a day a quarter with each one of my children. And this one day, Eric, is the pillars in our relationship. It's the reset button. So if people leave this podcast today and just say, I'm going to schedule a date, same bat time, same bat channel every week with my spouse, you will see a difference in your marriage within the next few months. Guaranteed. I've seen it too many times, especially if you're not doing it. And secondly, if you can just schedule a day a quarter, what you'll see the relationship with your children in a year, at least from the tens of thousands of people we've worked with, has been stunning. So that's the first step. The second step, Eric, I would say, is along with the one-to-one principle, you got to put intermittent tech fasting into your life, right? You were just telling me you and your wife take health very seriously. It sounds like we're aligned with, trying all sorts of things to really make the most of it. You got to be able to disconnect to reconnect. I appreciate technology. We would not be having this conversation, a few countries away right now. Yeah. But you have to have times of complete and total unavailability, and intermittent tech fasting is the same thing as intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, we're not giving up eating, Eric, right? We're just saying we're going to have the discipline to eat between this time and this time. And it does all sorts of things. Organ revitalization, good for blood flow, weight maintenance, muscle recovery, all sorts of things, right, has been shown from what I've read for intermittent fasting. Well, we found the same thing, Eric, for intermittent tech fasting. If you will just take certain times where you are unavailable on that date night, on that 1 day a quarter with your children, it is a game changer. Because what I found, and I can give some stories after you kind of unpack with me, but if you are always on, if you're always taking that next text, that next email, you've said to your family and the people closest to us, you're never truly available. And this is more important than we are. Now, that is tough to hear and swallow, because we're going, gosh, I'm doing it for my family. I want to provide, I want to be able to protect them. And my work, I think, is the best way. But again, there has to be times of complete and total unavailability. You're not giving up eating completely. You're only eating during these times. And I found once, and I'm my own addict, right? We always create what we need. I'm that guy who can grab the phone real quick, or let me check this useless Facebook thread, or answer this text right in front of my wife who's having a deep conversation. The more I got these things in line, Eric, with intermittent tech fasting were huge. So those would be what I would say if people don't listen to anything else on this podcast, I hope they will. But if they run with those two things, the one-to-one principle and intermittent tech fasting, their life can change for the better with their relationships.
Yeah, and like you said, there is a lot to unpack there. And I tell you, 2 years ago, if I heard this advice, I'd have been like, that sounds like my life is going to change dramatically. And I don't know if I'm willing to accept that. Well, 2 years ago, Eric was very different than who Eric is today. Eric today goes on a weekly date night with his wife. Eric today definitely tries to intermittent tech fast. I have not found the balance yet, but I am giving it a go. I am doing my best. When we go on our date nights, we have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and we have an au pair that lives with us. And sometimes I get real nervous. Like, are the kids being rude? Are they tearing up the house? Is my au pair alive? Like stuff like that I often just go in and check the nanny cam, or I'll go in and just, make sure things are okay. But that's just that's a control side I've got to let go. I trust our au pair. He is wonderful. He's fantastic. But I have this like control issue, I guess, with letting go. And I think that bleeds over to so much of what I do in general. Like, we have several renovation projects going on right now. And every time a text comes in, I'm like, is that the contractor? Is something wrong? Is that a delivery of supplies gone wrong? Is this what's going wrong? I need to fix it right now. And I have this control issue of I've got to let be what it's going to be, because even if I do respond right now, I'm not fixing it.
Yeah.
The fix is going to come in time.
And I got a great story for that. First, we are our biggest critics. Entrepreneurs are very critical of themselves, at least in the general whole. So when you say, gosh, I was, checking in with the au pair, that's a good thing. Like, my wife keeps her phone on date night because she has better control, and will check in with our babysitter nanny. Where the issue for me, Eric, was rude me of 7 years ago would get a work text and start answering it at a nice dinner. Or, hey, let me take this quick call. I mean, it's outrageous to look back how I was, so you're going back to check on your children, not on the work thing. Now, with the work projects, I got a good story that will really resonate with you and the audience. Another part of my intermittent tech fasting is I really try to turn off my phone for like 2 hours at the end of the day. Like 5:30 to 7:30, playtime, dinner time, I'm not getting pulled into anything. Well, we all break our own rules, and we have to forgive ourselves, because if we don't, then we just completely shut down. We throw the baby out with the bathwater. One of these days, Eric, my daughter now is 9. Well, one of my children, my third child, Maggie, is 9. When she was 5 years old, I came home, and I usually leave like my phone in my computer bag or right in my glove compartment. I didn't. I kept it in my pocket. I get out, and she's like, Daddy, can we go on the trampoline? We love our trampoline time. And I said, sure. So we get on the trampoline, Eric, and I feel that dreaded, or I hear that zzz, zzz, zzz in my pocket, right? And with renovation projects and all that going on, that noise has now set off my ADD initiative brain. What's going on? What's happened? What is this? I don't even have to see it, but now I've left the trampoline mentally, and I'm there. Well, I pull out my phone, Eric. It's 5:30, mind you, and there's been a silly, really ridiculous mistake that delayed the closing. It was a closing of a property we were selling. I mean, we're talking something simple. So it's 5:30. I can't do anything about it. I'm upset. I'm going in to fix an area. I'm swearing under my breath, right? This is all happening on the trampoline. And I finally come to, and I'm on the trampoline again with my daughter, and she's staring up at me with that little lower quiver lip. You know what I mean? When they get really sad. And, sweetie, what's wrong? What's wrong? I finally see, and she's like, oh, Daddy, why are you so mad at me? And it was like things paused, like it was a delay. And I'm like, wow, I just got so into this situation in front of my daughter. I think I'm good enough to multitask. I'm obviously not. I've worn my emotions and my business mind and initiative on my sleeve. And we know being in the trenches of real estate can be tough. And my daughter, seeing it, thought I was taking it. I was mad at her for something. Yeah. And it was such a lesson that we need those times of complete and total unavailability, because there's nothing I could do. Like you just said, it had to wait till the next day. Like if I had gotten that text 2 hours later after dinner time and family time and said, okay, that stinks, but I got to deal with it in the morning. But instead, it was projected onto my daughter. So I just remind people of that story because it's that important, because we're not as good as we think we are at separating the pieces when it's constantly trampling over things like family time.
Yeah. Gosh, it's such a punch in the gut when your kids do or say something that just puts you in the spotlight of negative behavior. Or, for me, the worst thing I could ever be is a bad husband and a bad father. And when your kid does something that like highlights a negative thing, it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to do better. And one of those things that did it for me was like maybe a few months ago, my 2.5, soon to be 3-year-old, he has a little fake computer that we've built out of cardboard for him. And he just went over to his little desk area where he paints, and he pulls it out, and he starts just typing away. I was like, what are you doing, buddy? He's like, I'm working, Dada. I'm working, Dada. And I was like, okay, can I help you? No, it's very important. I got to buy a house. And I was like in the moment, I was like, oh, that is so cool. He knows how to buy a house. But then I got to thinking about it more, and it's like, how much am I doing that around him?
Yeah.
And how much is he seeing me give that more attention? And obviously he's seen it a lot, because he just recreated it, and it just hurt. And I was like, my gosh, I've got to stop. I've got to, I'm not pulling my laptop out in the family room. I'm not pulling my laptop out when he's around.
Yeah.
Because when he's around, it's Matchbox cars and it's dinosaurs. That's what it should be. And it shouldn't be, hey, let's look at the pictures of this house together, which, is a unique way of bringing them into it. But also I'm doing what I want to do. I'm not doing something constructive that is going to help him cognitively and, growth wise. So
exactly. And you're realizing things, especially at 3 and 1, at a very good age. People come to me at much older with their kids, and they're really playing catch up. Now the catch up can happen, but anyway, you look at it, they're playing catch up.